today. I'm here with Tamara, and we're just talking about her life, how she got into art, and how she ended up working with Persona Land. Let's get right into it. When you were younger, I was going through your website, and it sounded like you started working on art at a very young age. You mind t telling me a little bit about that?
Well, my mother was an artist and she encouraged me and I looked up to her and admired her because she was my mother and it was so she was like my first art teacher and my first example. And my mother died of cancer when I was almost 9 years old, just like a week before my birthday or
Oh,
something, two
I'm so
weeks
sorry to
before my
hear that.
birthday. And so, of course, that was a trauma and it was hard, but it also kind of catapulted me into the direction of becoming an artist. Uh, I mean, I had to, I had therapy years later as a young adult, and I had to uh had to differentiate myself from my mother and find my own reasons for being an artist and not just because she wanted me to. Um uh but 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 that was certainly a very strong influence.
So what was that journey like trying to figure out creating art for yourself and that relationship with your mother? Did that reflect in the type of art you were making?
Actually, my art doesn't look anything at all like her art.
Hmm.
Uh, she um, she was very interested in classical sculpture, like neoclassical sculpture. She loved ancient Greece. I also love ancient Greece, but I didn't go into sculpture, and I didn't go into realism. My art is more expressionist and uh so my art doesn't look anything like my mother's.
Yeah. Were you pursuing art like separately? Were you doing it at school? What was that like?
Yeah, in high school I was able to major in art and I had a really good teacher named Mary Jane Slyke who I'm still in touch with
Oh,
who uh who actually I wasn't teacher's pet. She didn't pay more attention to me than any other student, but she really helped me. She really talked very seriously about how to be an artist and then later in college I had an art history teacher named Christy Jones who inspired me greatly just how passionately she spoke about art and those teachers helped me especially and but it I got a bachelor's degree in fine arts and it didn't really they talked to me about making art, but they didn't really prepare me for the world. Um, I didn't know how to be an artist. I didn't know how to function in the art world. And uh, so I floundered around the first few years I got out of college. I had one teacher that encouraged us all to move to New York. I grew up in Los Angeles, and of course there was an art world in Los Angeles. I could have stayed there, but uh, it seemed very exciting to move, and I came here without I moved here without ever even visiting here. So
Oof.
just made this jump, and it was
Wha-
the 19 it was 1979.
So what
And
was that transition like? Moving from like sunny, warm Los Angeles to here.
well, it was I mean, the 1980s were really intense in New York. There was quite interesting things going on. I lived on the Lower East Side, near the East Village that had a booming art scene for a while, and there were other things going on. It was rough. There was crime. Um,
What were you doing for work after right after
oh, I
college
didn't
in
know
New
what
York?
to do. I had no job skills. I worked in a health food store, and then I got a job working in a mannequin factory.
Oh,
Painting.
how's that?
That was funny. I was painting faces on the mannequins
Oh,
by hand with oil paint, and
oh, okay.
but I was kind of immature and didn't get along with people very well, so I left that, and then I became a museum guard at the Metropolitan Museum. That was a great job, and it was a hard job. It was hard because you aren't allowed to sit down. You have to stand all day, and it gets very tiring. But what was great was being able to look at the art all day long. And there's something that happens when you look at an artwork for a very long time that's really wonderful. Like usually when people go to a museum, they only spend a few seconds with each artwork. You look at an artwork for like a minute at the most, usually less than a minute, and then you move on to the next artwork and the next one, and you go through the museum. But I had to stay in one room, and and so I was like looking at the same few paintings for hours. And the paintings, you, these are great paintings, and they grow on you, and you start to see more and more. And it is, I highly recommend that everyone who loves art should try that. Go to a museum and choose a painting, and don't leave. Stay there for an hour.
So
And I
was
was there for longer than an hour. I was there all day long.
yeah, so was being a security guard at the Met like changing your perspective on how art was to be created, but also to be like digested?
Yeah, I really learned an enormous a lot. I mean, one of the reasons to live in New York is because of all the great museums we have. But working as a security guard, that I had to stay with one painting, and that's really, really important to learn to look at paintings and stay with them. It I don't know if I can explain it exactly, but
Was it
it's
like
really wonderful.
is it like like examining the technique closely? Is it just the general feeling you get from staring at it for
It's
a long time?
both. It's
Uh,
like you look at it and you'll see details that you didn't notice. Part of
it,
it is like looking at it and looking at every little detail. But another part of it is it somehow penetrates into your whole mind and all your senses and probably your unconscious and it starts to open up and glow. It's really really a very important thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up because I noticed that the New York Times is starting to have like daily artworks and they're forcing you to like stare at it for like 15 minutes with like
Wait,
no
who does this?
the New York Times, they like
Oh,
put up a new like a artwork and then they're like you have to stare at it for 15 minutes like no distractions. And I feel like as someone who's still growing up, my attention span is like all over the place. I'm like, oh, I gotta check my email, I gotta check my text, I gotta see what's this. So like sitting down, I hate to admit it, but like sitting down and staring at a piece of artwork, I feel like it's difficult for like me and for other young people because my mind's bouncing off the wall. So like since you're
yeah.
talking about like the benefits of like sitting down and looking at a piece of artwork, like that's something that I should be trying to do more.
But it's
So
like meditation. Meditation
yeah.
is also just sitting and doing nothing. And so, yeah.
So when you were working these jobs, the mannequin store and being a security guard at the Met, were you also practicing your own art or were you just focused on working?
Oh, of course, I worked on my own art.
So what type of art were you making throughout college and now like post college moving into New York?
Uh, well, in college, when I was in college, conceptual art was very popular, and that was hard for me, 'cause I entered college wanting to be a painter, and then I was being told that painting is dead and I
Oh,
shouldn't
brutal.
paint anymore. I had a boyfriend that was pressuring me to stop painting,
Oh.
so that was painfully confusing.
Yeah.
And
Do you agree with that painting's dead? Like, do you?
no, no,
Yeah.
no, of course I don't. But I was young and that was what was in style and that was
Yeah.
what people were talking about. But I did start doing performance art in college.
What
And
type of performance art were you doing?
uh oh, I had they were like scenes, like symbolic scenes. I was very interested in surrealist film. And so my performances were like little surrealist scenes, I guess, or symbolic scenes. I still do performance art, and I'm very interested in ritual. So some of my performances are more like ritual, and others are more uh, expressionist. I make what I'm doing now is that I make body prints, and that means that I put paint on a model's skin and then I rub it onto cloth, and then I get an image of the person, uh, a direct imprint, and that lends itself to performance art. And I've done performances where we make a print of somebody else. But I've also done performances where I put paint on my own skin. And and sometimes my performances are very I've done a number of performances that are about the climate crisis, and I call it climate grief. And I usually give a speech about all the animals that are going extinct and all the wildfires and the floods And while I'm doing this, I'm putting paint on my skin with my hands. And then I start screaming and
Oh.
crying. And and at the height of it, then I make I have assistants that help me make a body print. And I've done that a number of times.
So, so do you enjoy that like intersection between performance art but also creating something physical?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. There's a number of other performance artists that do things sort of like that, and so yeah, so I was really glad to be exposed to other things in school. I don't hate conceptual art. I think it's had an important place in history, and it continues to. I I uh, I guess the way it was presented to me at that point in my life, I was confused and it was painful. But I guess that's what happens when when you're in your late teens.
Yeah. So after working jobs in New York, what was the transition out of that? Or were you trying to go into your own
Well,
art, or I saw you
I
travel?
I actually became an illustrator after some struggle with these different jobs. It's I don't know if I want to go into a whole long story, but someone
No, feel free.
introduced me, and I became a technical illustrator for archaeologists, especially
Oh wow.
Egyptologists. And that's a completely different from my fine art. I was working with rapidograph pens and making very accurate line drawings of ancient objects, and um, I I worked at the Metropolitan Museum and I volunteered at the Brooklyn Museum, and then and I kept working to promote myself, and eventually I got to go on excavations in Egypt
Wow.
and also went on excavations in Turkey and Spain and Belize. And working as an illustrator helped me become more disciplined, understanding deadlines and working consistently, and helped me. It helped me as a fine artist that way. I'm retired from illustration now.
Yeah, something about illustration, especially for like illustrating historical objects feels like quite technical, but not as creative. Was that something that you were also feeling at the time, or what was that balance like?
Well, it's not creative in the sense of being inventive or expressive. There is problem solving. Um, but there's a set style, uh, and I love ancient Egypt, and I let ancient Egyptian art influence my fine art, and I so it was wonderful. I did put a lot of work into it. I didn't stop with my fine art. I continued to make fine art, and you know, and when when I finished my projects, but yeah.
So after you retired from illustration, was that when you started creating printmaking and
No,
going back to performance?
I started making the body prints before I became an illustrator. I was at an art colony that the feminist writer Kate Millett, she had a farm in Poughkeepsie, and it was like a women's art colony. And I started making the body prints there. And I just never let go of that. I just kept working on them off and on over the years.
Was was there any influence in feminism with your with your printmaking and putting paint on the body?
Yeah, I am a feminist, and there was a lot of feeling of accepting my body, and 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 it was and it was also like the environment of being at this all women's it was like a summer residency. So I had people around who could help me, because it's hard to make a body print by yourself. You need someone to help. And and so I felt very free, and it was very uh, supportive, a very supportive environment. And I spent 2 summers there, and I'm really grateful for that time there. I also went to some other residencies at the Vermont Studio Center and at um, Fundación Valparaíso in Spain. Uh, and so artist residencies can be very, very helpful to artists.
Yeah, could
And
you speak more on that, on creating art at an artist residency, the effect it had on you and how it's different working at a residency versus just working by yourself?
well, there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
One thing about a residency is that it's temporary. They're usually somewhere between a month to 3 months. Uh, and usually you have to travel, so you have to pack up all your art supplies and bring them over there. So often the residencies are like not near public transportation. Like, so once you're there, if you don't have a car, you can't get around or anything. You can't go out to buy more art supplies, or you have to like kind of bring everything with you. And then you work and you start getting this body of work, and then your residency is up and you have to go. And you're like, I tend to get influenced by where I am, and
Yeah.
I'm starting this body of work based on where I am, and then oops, time's up, you gotta go. And then like I don't know how to come back to New York. I'm like, I don't know how to continue what I started there. I have to shift gears, and
Yeah,
so that's hard. But it is nice. I mean, it's also nice that you don't have a car and you can't leave, and there isn't distractions. You're just there with this nice space, and you get to work, and then there's other artists around that, so there's some camaraderie, and you get to look at what other people are working on. And uh I I haven't done a whole lot of collaborating at residencies. Some residencies encourage it. I think I collaborated a teeny weeny bit here and there, but mostly I did my own work.
so, you said you were influenced by where the residency was? Was that like the specific location, like the specific place you're staying at? Or was that like the general country you were staying in?
Well, when I was at the Vermont Studio Center, I was working outdoors in the woods. There was like a small forest, and I was making art out of twigs and leaves and natural materials and leaving them as installations in the woods, like not bringing in foreign materials, just rearranging stuff in the woods and that was really wonderful. And then um then I came back to the city and I was trying to switch gears, it was
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Oh, is it like rough, like abruptly going back to New York? And does the city kind of feel limiting by then, or does it feel like you just have to change how you're creating?
Felt like I had to change how I was creating. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to speak more about the art you're making currently. And you spoke
Mhm.
before on how you are a feminist and you also made art inspired by climate change. I also saw on your website on Instagram that you were making art about like the war in Ukraine. So could you just speak a little about how current events affect the work that you're creating?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly am concerned about current events and social justice and certainly that we're living in a really hard time right now with the current administration. I'm very worried about. My art isn't always pointedly political,
Yeah.
but it can be. Um, I uh, I uh, I don't usually um, I don't I don't usually try to tell people what to do. I'm usually more expressive, though I sometimes I make art as a political banner to carry in a march, though. I'm working on one right now. That's a collaboration with my partner, Seth Tabachman. He made a drawing of a woman in flames with the phoenix rising. And the idea is that the people's movements might seem to die, but then they rise up again like the phoenix, that the phoenix dies and then is reborn from the ashes. And so he made this drawing and I looked at it and I said, "Oh, I want to make a body print like your drawing." And so I'm making it to be a political banner um, to be carried in marches, and I hope to finish it soon. And I have made banners before. It's quite wonderful. If it's a big march, then hundreds or maybe even thousands of people could see your banner as you carry it. And people
Yeah.
are taking pictures, And another thing that's wonderful is the banner is carried in the sunlight, and the sunlight will shine through it.
Oh, wow.
And I make them two-sided, and I'm very aware how the sun will shine through, and the other side will show. Anyway, it's a beautiful effect uh,
Yeah.
to be aware of, and uh, so that's something political. I also sometimes, instead of doing a big banner to carry, sometimes I make small things like prints on cloth, and then I put safety pins on it, and then I pass it out to people. And some years ago, there was a march for the environment, and one of the symbols was the sunflower because sunflowers pull toxins out of the soil. And I made these prints where I put paint on an actual sunflower and made prints onto cloth. And then I just put little safety pins on it, and we passed them out to people marching, and they could safety pin it on their jacket or on their bag. And that's, that's a lot of fun. So I'm giving out my art for free in
Yeah.
that context.
Do you find yourself when you're making art for a social issue, for environmental issue, versus when you're making art for your own personal work, do you find your mentality that goes into it is different?
No.
No, it's
uh, no, I don't think so.
okay.
I think trying to think. I might sometimes think. I guess maybe there is a difference in that. Like with a march, you usually want the message to be clear and not. Um, you don't want it to be misinterpreted.
Yeah,
Uh, well, maybe something more personal can have multiple interpretations and everybody, and I guess that can be true with anything, but um usually with a protest you're trying to make a point, and so I probably don't make a as specific a point as other people do with their political work, but I try to be a little mindful that way.
of course. Also another question I had is just how did you get in contact with Persona Land? How did you start working with this organization?
Gee, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure I found it on the internet. I'm
Yeah,
uh I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and
yeah.
probably through that one of those. I I but it's a really friendly, supportive group. I like the people involved. We had a show. Oh God, I should have. I have a terrible memory. I'm
All
sorry.
good. No, no
But there
worries at
was a
all.
show in person a couple years ago, Plant Life, I think it was called, and
Okay.
it was all a lot of pictures of flowers, and it was in person in New York. It was uptown. And so I got to meet people in person, and I came up and helped hang the show, and uh, because most of
First,
Persona Land is online.
yeah,
That's nice. I mean, actually, the internet is so great for connecting with people all over the world. But it also was really nice to have an event in person where I got to meet people in person, and that was
yes.
wonderful.
Speaking on that is that like Persona is kind of this newer like digital art gallery that has shows online. And how does that compare to like an established like museum like the Met? Since you worked at both, obviously in different positions, like what do you see any similarities or differences?
Oh, well, they're very different. I mean, I have to say, I think it's almost always better to see the work in person. Uh,
Okay.
and But the internet, there is value in the internet that uh I mean, with the internet, you can reach people internationally. And I have met people, met, if you can say, without actually meeting them in person, but I've met people online. I have friends in Japan and Ukraine and Italy and uh, Brazil, and I've never met them in person. And I mean, that is something that's really fantastic that I didn't have when I was younger. And I think that's a huge change in society that we have this international communication. And and so online shows and other online platforms are really important that way, that we get to, like, I think that art, that's physical and tactile, like it's really important to see it in person, but at the same time, the ability to, like if you were only going to see stuff in person, then you can only see stuff within, your own area. And so I think it's really, really marvelous that we can connect with each other all over the world.
Yeah. What are the difference on being an artist when there's the access to digital, when I'm able to see your works online on your website, on social media, versus before where it like pieces of art could only be experienced in person?
Um, well, I mean, I do, I'm older and I admit I do miss my the time I lived through before um computers. There were advantages to that. There were disadvantages. I mean, I love computers and internet and cell phones. I use them. Uh, uh, I'm fully engaged with all that now, but there were things about the pre-computer time uh, where people went out more. Like if you wanted to find out something, or you wanted to talk to people, you had to leave your house or apartment. And so there were more in-person meetings, and people would come. And like if you wanted to know something, you had to go to a library or a bookstore, and bookstores um were very lively. There was like St. Mark's Bookshop that I would go there regularly and look at what the new art books were, and there would be some new book on art theory, and everybody was talking about the book. And like or there would be a talk or a meeting, and people would go and have these lively discussions in person. And I miss that. Like now
Yeah.
I find it hard to get people to meet in person. Like I really have to nag people like, or like it's very of course we went through the pandemic too, that also drove people to stay home more. And some people, and in some ways, I mean, it's so easy to just stay home. And
Yeah.
it's so easy it wasn't easy to stay home back then. You really had to go out. Uh,
Yeah. Going back to when going to bookstores and seeing the new art history books and seeing new art come out, did it feel like art was more kind of like an event, like, oh, like this new thing was created or this new style is being developed and we have to talk about it. Rather than like, I feel like digitally I could just scroll and see like a bunch of different artworks and just be like, oh, that's cool. Oh, like, oh, that's neat. Like, I like how that looks.
Yeah,
And then just passively look through and experience art. Oh, what was that difference like?
yeah, I well, like I said, you would go to galleries and you'd see the art in person, and part of seeing the art in person is seeing the size, that whether the art, like a large painting, can affect you in a different way than a small painting that's intimate. And, on a screen, whether it's your phone or a computer, everything's the same size.
Yeah.
Like, and, and there's, I mean, the way I use the internet, I I scroll through and then I see something I really like and I copy it. And I have an external hard drive that's
Mhm.
full of JPEGs of art that I like, that I use for reference, like for inspiration. A lot of ancient art, and then some, you know, from other periods of time, including contemporary. So I don't, I mean, I do a lot of passive just scrolling, and clicking the like button, but I do a little more. I'm actually a JPEG collector. I have a huge JPEG collection. Uh, but um, but yeah, there was. I guess it goes back to seeing art in person. And there are still, I mean, we can still do that, and we still do that. And it can be actually easier in a way to find out what there is to see. Um, you can, there are websites that tell where the art openings are, or what the galleries are showing, or what the museums are showing. I have a list of things to see, and there's so much to see, I don't make it to everything. I've
Yeah.
never been able to keep up with everything. But
I just want to add on another a thought I had was when you see like what's these museums and installations what they're showing, it's kind of
mhm.
just like oh, this is the art you could see at this place versus online everything's kind of curated for you. It's like an algorithm telling you like, oh, this is what art we think you would like to enjoy. Is there something
Yeah.
different between just going somewhere and be like, this is the art we have, this is the art you experience versus like something telling you like, oh, you think you'll probably like this. You should look at this.
Yeah. Well, one thing about the internet, like before the internet, you saw, yeah, it before the internet, stuff was curated also. The galleries chose who they wanted to show, the museum chooses who they want to see. And the internet, maybe you're getting the algorithm, but I have found so many artists that they never taught me about in art history class, that I think I've seen a wider range of art on the internet in a lot of ways. So it's I'm sure, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure my feed is getting filtered by the algorithm, but I've seen a lot of stuff that I was not aware of before the internet. So
Yeah, so there's some good, some bad, but it's also
Yeah,
similar in person.
yeah.
Yeah. That's all I have to ask for you, but do you have anything you like to say to leave off on?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm working every day on my art. I make the body print when I actually make the body print where I put paint on the model, and then I rub it onto cloth, but that's not the end of it. I paint over it and around it. Would you like me to share my screen and show you a few things?
Yeah, sure. I would love that.
Okay, so this is one is called Anger Shines Through Me, and it's a two-sided painting. It was made as a performance.
Okay.
And my friend read a poem by Marge Piercy, who's a feminist writer. And Marge actually gave me permission to read her poem, which was an honor. It was a, and so the initial body print was made as a performance. And then a lot of the splattering I made later in the studio. And this is one of my newest paintings. This is the sky goddess with a worshiper. So it's two body prints, and it's meant to be very, just the splatters are meant to show all of this energy, the spiritual energy, with the interaction of the priestess and the goddess. Um, and this is an Egyptian creation myth. And in this creation myth, the earth god was in love with the sky goddess, and they were making love all the time. And the sun god was jealous and ordered the god of air to separate them.
Oh,
So the pale green figure is lifting the sky away from the earth.
oh.
And
Was
and
was was that influenced by the time you spent in Egypt learning about the culture there?
oh well, yes, I mean I was interested in Egypt long before I went to Egypt,
I
but
see.
yeah, it's from Egyptian mythology and looking at Egyptian art.
Yeah.
Uh, this is uh another one I made as a performance that was had to do with the climate crisis. And you can see I've painted the body print was made during the performance, and then after the performance, I painted in the forest fire. And there are two versions.
Oh, wow.
So this is kind of the trees are about to be burned,
Yeah.
the leaves on them, and then here the leaves they've been actually burned. So
Oh, wow.
I made two versions, and they're not in the right order, but
No,
this is
no, no,
another
don't worry about
version
it.
of the sky goddess with the priestess.
Yeah. It looks beautiful.
I often do two versions when I make a body print. So much to get the model and get everything set up that I usually do two copies so that, and then I do two versions. Uh, this is was also made as a performance piece, and the cloth was pressed up against a window when I made this. And the and I so the body print was made as a performance, and then the paint splatters are put in after the performance in my studio. And this is a little different. This is called Man of Fire, and this is inspired by Jose Clemente Orozco. Um, did a painting of the same title in Guadalajara, and it doesn't look like his compositionally, but it's like the same subject of this flaming man, and it's a reference to Prometheus, the Greek myth where he brings fire to mankind. Um, and this is another one I made as a performance piece, and then worked on it in the studio. Usually, like the body print itself is very simple, and then I do this very expressionist splashing. Um, and then this is one of my friends, um, and it's called Lightbringer, which refers to the planet Venus. That the planet Venus sometimes rises in the east like an hour before dawn. And so she was called bringer of the light, that when you saw the planet Venus rise, then you knew the dawn would come soon.
Oh, wow.
Um, and this one is of my friend who's disabled, and he has problems with his one arm is always bent. He can't straighten his arm. And I took there's a story from the Brothers Grimm's and from Hans Christian Andersen, both tell this story. There were six brothers who were cursed by a witch and turned into swans. And they had one sister who rescued them by knitting magic sweaters. And she had to finish the sweaters by midnight. And midnight, she's knitting and knitting all day long, and midnight comes and she throws the sweaters on the swans, and they all become human again. But the youngest brother, she didn't finish knitting the one sleeve. So when he became human, he, instead of one arm, he had a swan's wing.
Oh, so that was
And
the inspiration behind it?
yeah, so this is a metaphor for my friend's disability. And I made the wing, I collected pigeon feathers and other feathers, and I dipped the feather in paint and printed the feather to make the wing. And then the swans are stencils. Um,
That's beautiful. I like how you brought your own friend's personal story as well as the story about the six brothers that were cursed. I like how they connected together.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
I guess that's all. I
well,
guess that's
thank you
enough.
for walking me through a few pieces of your work and t telling me the story behind them and how they were made. I really found that fascinating. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, I couldn't have you interview me and not show the actual art, you know?
Yeah,
So,
so
uh,
thank you.
okay, well, thank you.